Okay, in this video, I'm going to walk through our system of annotation, which we refer back to Marissa Thompson's TQE system. And I'm going to talk all about that, including links to her original work. So if you want to go to the source, I highly recommend that. She has been transformational in what curiosity looks like in our classroom. But I'm going to walk through our system, how I introduced it, but also the why behind it. And then in a follow-up video, I'm going to talk about something new I'm going to try out this year to really go a step further in terms of depth with students going beyond this with close reading. And I want to be really clear. We don't do this for everything, right? Like if we're reading a longer text, like we can't stop and like highlight and mark up every single thing. Like close reading has value. It is something we do sometimes not all the time, but the muscles that come from it, I would argue, are essential. So what the things I go through is that, especially when I teach kind of upper level high school students in my junior course, they're going to read texts that they're not going to get the first time. They're going to be like, oh, I don't know what this means. If we read a poem, they might be, this part I'm not sure. And so often I've noticed, especially in the last like 5 years, students shutting down, that's something that's a wall for them. And my goal is to help them push through that. That's why I love this octopus analogy that I'm going to come back to a lot throughout this tool, that octopuses can really squeeze through anything as long as it's bigger than their beak. And there's like some great videos online that I show them, and that basically I say like that's what they need to do, is become the octopus and find a way into the text, and that this system of annotating can be helpful, especially if they stay away from just being like, oh, it's broad or generic in their interpretation, but instead marking up, highlighting specific words, even punctuation, and saying, hey, I think this might matter. The precision is the path to the solution, which circles back to this analogy. I have a poster of this in my room. I refer to it a lot. We don't always go through every single step, but I think in the ideal, if we're reading a short text, whether it's like a short story or an excerpt or a poem, we're going to try and use this routine quite often, because I want students to eventually internalize this. And we talk about 3 reads. And the first read is basically like, before we go in, hey, what's the title? Author, if we want to use like a biographical lens, that's something we might do a little bit more work with. And then I'm going to read it aloud, or they'll read it and they'll just highlight gut response. This feels interesting. I have a question about this. And then once they're done, just a 1-sentence summary above the iceberg, not going for deeper meaning. Hey, what is this? Like, what's going on here? Talking about that. And then I give them time and I say, hey, look at your highlights. You can go back and add more. If something, thoughts and questions, which I'm going to go into on the next 2 slides, again, with links back to Marissa Thompson's initial explanations of these as well. And that is, for me, the heart of this, is that they're getting messy with the text. They're going underneath the iceberg. They're going into that deeper meaning with that step 2. They're reading back through it, and they are explaining what their thoughts and questions are, and they're marking it up. And then almost always there is, between steps 2 and steps 3, we're going to talk, we're going to share. And there's so many things you can do, right? Like you can for example, you can everyone share your most important thought and question, starting with the smallest desk number in your small group, go around. And now I start calling it out and we start marking it up on the board, whole class. I oftentimes will have them leave their annotations from steps 4 and 5 on their desks. And students will silently go around the room and look at others and come back and add to their own. And that's where we'll get to the epiphany stage. So I could go off like on 10 different things, but the most important thing is that step 2, or that step 2 read, is so collaborative. And then we get to okay, what did I realize? The epiphanies. And then we have those conversations about the theme. Why does it matter? We might not always do that formally in terms of writing. I'm going to talk about that with the second part of this video, what that looks like. So going through thoughts, questions, and epiphanies. Thoughts, I use the phrase, what did you notice? Like, I noticed ... We introduce this with the story sticks. I'll provide a reference to that in the post that goes along with this video. I'm going to read through a few of them. I noticed that the pole seems to be associated with holidays in the first paragraph. So that's something a student could have written down. I noticed how the first paragraph ends with I and the second paragraph begins with we. So maybe they like drew an arrow between those two. Again, you'll note the why, like the deeper meaning of these noticings, is not included. It's just saying, I noticed this feels important. That gut instinct of marking the text and adding something that they notice that they can come back to later on and then elaborate further. And that's what I really appreciate about this, the T in TQE, the thoughts, that the noticings, is it's not skipping ahead. So often students are, I don't understand like what this is all about, or I understand the deeper meaning, and then they shut down. I'm saying, hey, just what do you notice? And then talk with that with others, get their noticings collaboratively. This is what noticings looks like. And then we go to the I wonderings. And I love this because I think so often the questions and the wonderings is the hardest part. And oftentimes a wondering is what leads to understanding the text. So really modeling, and this is something I want to do better this next year, is modeling what these questions can look like. So it's not just what does this word mean, but why the narrator. I wondered why the narrator compares the pole to the crucifix in the first line. I wonder what the phrase concession to glee means, and more importantly, why does it matter? It's a little bit more of a vocab one. I wonder what the narrator means when they say, I sat there blinking. So maybe they understood 80% of what they read, but there's that 20% or that line where they're not really sure what it's doing. They should mark that down, write that down, and then bring that into their conversation with their partners afterwards. So the idea of like giving them space to literally write down questions. And then a lot of times we'll do an activity such as, okay, everyone share their most important question, write down on a sticky note your group's most important question. We'll bring them to the front of the room, and then we're going to rank those or talk about those as a class. So we'll just do a question focused conversation in our interpretation. So this is where I'm trying to articulate how this system is so flexible in terms of what it becomes in the classroom. You build the foundations so students know how to do a T, a Q, and an E, and we build the muscles, and then it becomes so many other things in the classroom, including like a question-centered interpretation. So the question stage, and I have a link, by the way, to the story that I'm referring to. And then finally, epiphanies. And this is, without question, the trickiest one. And I think I love epiphany as a term. What I have shifted to in terms of explaining it, after you've done your thoughts, after your questions, what do you realize? What are like the deeper understandings or takeaways that you think you might have? And I've got 4 kind of bigger picture ones. This is something you get to later on in the process. So I almost always thoughts and questions, discuss. Now, what does your group realize? What did another group realize? Maybe I'm going to point out some things that they want to add. And these are often what would then, if we're going to shift to writing, those epiphanies are what lead into like the written interpretation or the like the bigger part of the discussion. Epiphany is the wall. I've had students who are like 3 months into the class are like, Mr. Luther, I don't really know how to do epiphanies. I'm going to work on doing that better this year. The phrase I realized has helped me be successful in moving students. And I'm going to try and model that more often going forward. So what does this look like? So you got the visual here of some samples. Some of these are from me. Some of these are from students. You can see the left and the right one are both from my classroom. Students will color code a lot of times early on when we're modeling this. The middle one is something like when I'm doing our poem a month thing activity on Blue Sky this summer, like any poem I'm reading, I'm annotating with I wonder, I notice, I wonder, I realize, just to practice the muscles, which is good for you as a teacher. If you're going to do any system, you should be modeling it yourself, not just so for example, but so there's like this authenticity of like, hey, this is something I can use myself and I can talk you through what it looks like. And of course, I also try to bring in these like whys at the end. That one of our values in our classroom is that every student sees things based on their own experience. They notice different things than the student they're sitting next to, and from me as the teacher. And that unique capacity is an asset, and we need to get as many voices involved in the conversation to see the whole picture. We have the analogy of the 6 blindfolded men and the elephant that we normed to begin the year. So this matters because it helps more people share their interpretations, so we see more things. The second thing is that so often students, when we move into writing, they might have just like sat by when we read some stuff or in the early stages of a unit and be like, I don't really get it. And then they wait till other people get it, or I share some stuff and then they write down. But then we get to an assessment or a discussion, a seminar, and they don't have the muscles to do it for themselves. TQEs can be part of that process. And then it also takes time. It's not going to be the first day everything clicks. Some texts are easier than others, but it is something that I want to make sure I acknowledge is going to take some time. I also would add, this is kind of like my written process of how I would explain it. I know there's way too many words for me to talk through, but the biggest thing is this is a system that in my mind can be the foundation of your classroom in terms of curiosity and interpretation and close reading, and can then open the door to so many other things. Shout out to Marissa Thompson for introducing this to me. And I'm just trying to pay forward that by sharing it with as many others as possible. Let me know if you have questions about it too.